Hello there guys, it's Joey. So I'm going to be doing this video on Facebook and then I'm going to be porting it over to YouTube. So before we start, I'm going to say a few things with regards to my permission value of talking about this, because I've noticed a few points which are being raised that like smaller YouTubers shouldn't be saying anything because they're all jealous and other things of that nature. So everybody gets to discuss these things, I guess, is the only thing that I can say before we start. And the reason that I personally decided to make this video, because I've been thinking long and hard about whether I even wanted to join this discussion, is that every single January I make content around the suicide topic, the depression topic, because it is the statistically proven worst month for suicides is January. So I ummed and ahed about whether or not I wanted to even address this, because if you don't know what's going on, Logan Paul is a dude bro YouTuber who has millions and millions of followers, and he made a video where he vlogged entrance into the Japanese suicide forest, found a man who had killed himself, and proceeded to vlog it, take pictures, selfies with it, with him. And uploaded it to YouTube. Demonetized, and it's now a huge news story. It's in local news. So this guy does not need any more attention than he already has. So for a while I was like, I don't know that I even want to add to this person's presence online. I'm going to preface by saying I don't like what Logan Paul puts out there. I talked about Logan Paul recently because he made a quote-unquote music video where he called women handlebars and bicycles and things to be ridden, and I'm like, this is something we have never needed in society, is this kind of attitude towards people, this sort of attitude towards women, this kind of, you must buy all my quote-unquote merch, and like half his songs are just that way inclined. So I'm going to preface by saying I don't like the guy anyway. So I fully admit my bias that I do not like Logan Paul anyway. But hi, Chris. So Chris and I have actually been talking and started talking about with the podcast with the topic of suicide anyway. And it's a very important topic for me. Every single year I try and address it. I try and reach out to people who might be suffering, who might be feeling on the brink, on the edge, and letting people know that they're not alone. So the reason that I wanted to make this video is because that topic is already at the forefront of my mind. And having seen the callous way in which this individual purposefully went out and recorded himself in the Japanese suicide forest, there are a few points that I want to talk about that I haven't seen talked about as much, and things that I have seen talked about, but I want to put my opinion out there and just say how I feel about it. So the first point is people are arguing that, he's being clickbaity on YouTube, and other people are saying, well, everybody's clickbaity on YouTube because they want you to watch it. And it's just to the point where he's vlogged every day for 400 and something days, and he's gotten to the point where he's constantly trying to up the ante, and we've now got to the point where he's recording suicide victims. There are a number of points about the kind of energy and message that these kind of people are putting out that bothers me on a number of levels. My first thought is the Logan Paul, his brother, and a number of others, they all come from this group, I've forgotten what it's called, it's something 10, and it's kind of supporting the dude bros on YouTube. They have billionaire backing. It's like the modern Disney Club. Like my generation had the Disney Club that sort of birthed Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Justin Timberlake, and these people are coming out of a similar kind of group. And the group in itself kind of seems kind of creepy. Like the guy leading it asks for naked selfies from young people. Like it's documented online that he does that. It's all a bit creepy and weird. And then that they have billionaires supporting them. And I was thinking about this morning and wondering whether or not this billionaire investment and all that side of it is going on behind the scenes and is pushing young people to be constantly selling merch, to constantly be like trying to up and up and up the drama to try and, repay these billionaires. I wonder if that's going on behind the scenes. No proof, just a thought. That I haven't seen that discussed, whether or not there is a pressure on these people to be performing in such a way. I don't know whether that's possible. I don't know whether that's true. If it's not an excuse, even if it is, but I know that I've seen a few things about this group that birthed Logan Paul and the like, and there was 2 Spanish twins who said that they'd been like conned out of money and they were like being forced to perform and they wanted out and all the rest of it. So there is that element that there may well be adults pushing younger people who clearly haven't had a whole lot of real life experience, because they've basically, they're rich boys and they've never really struggled by the looks of it. So we're talking about the Logan Paul who's on YouTube. He uploaded a video where he went to the Japanese suicide forest and he recorded a man who had committed suicide, and he was not, I don't even know how, he was not even humane about it. He was callous about it. He was making jokes about it. He was mocking it. He was videoing it. He was doing close-up shots of the guy, and he took a selfie for his picture that he uploaded with him and the dead guy in the background, and it was very narcissistic. And there was this whole narcissistic, ego vapid culture that came around the video, and there's been uproar since. So I do wonder whether or not there is a billionaire older generation of it's all males that I've seen that support this group of people so far, pushing these young kids into the point where it's becoming like this insidious culture of depravity, of dehumanizing and selling is kind of what it's, they dehumanize women. They're now dehumanizing people's struggles. And he put a disclaimer on it. He claimed that he was doing this for suicide awareness. And the problem I have with that is that there are people who do stuff for suicide awareness, and this is not how you do it. You don't mock people. And he was mocking, and it was all about him. This is an experience we've had now, is one of the lines he uses in that. And it really just shows that the only focus of these people is themselves. And it's not just him. There's a group around him of yes men and women doing all the same thing, thinking it's funny. And some people are like, maybe it's shock. Maybe that was a genuine surprise. And I'm like, I don't feel that you go into the Japanese suicide forest to vlog an experience and then are surprised when you find somebody who's committed suicide, because it's a renowned, famous or infamous spot where people go to end their lives in Japan. And I feel like that was planned. Like the whole thing is planned. They had a guide with them. They had a Japanese guide with them. They had a Japanese guide who was quite upset about the subject with them. And he'd known like a school friend who had died. So I feel like there was premeditation to the whole thing. I don't feel like it was a surprise incident. I don't believe that for a second. You don't go into somewhere renowned, infamous for being a suicide forest, and then are surprised and continue to video and continue to mock a dead body of somebody who could not carry on with their life, and they ended their life. So there's that element to it. He's since apologized, and the apology is again more all about him, how hard his life is vlogging every day, and he lost sight of things. So there is an argument going around that people are trying to get him banned from YouTube, and then there's the free speech element of whether or not, free speech on YouTube, and the fact that a lot of Logan Paul's channel is supported by very young people, like young as 8. I think the general demographic is about 13 to 15, and he's basically tainting the mind of children, is the argument for some people. Other people are saying it's the parents' job to filter what their kids are watching. I have a few points about this. Firstly, I'm not entirely sure that most people would think to watch YouTube for content like that, what that their kids have been watching. Now, first of all, if I was a parent, and I know it's easy to say, but I wouldn't want my children watching Logan Paul anyway. I think his message is debase. I think his message is vain. I think his message is, vapid. I think it's all about dehumanizing and self-centered arrogance for the most part. He just released Christmas videos where he tells Santa to go F himself, that he slept with Santa Claus's wife, and the kids who are listening should tell Santa to go F himself because they didn't give him Logan Paul merch. So throw away your Christmas presents and go get some of his merch is one of his messages to kids. So all in all, I wouldn't support my kids watching that sort of thing. I think he sends out a terrible message anyway, but that's by the by. I don't know how many parents would keep a full eye, and whether or not they would expect that kind of content given the general kind of content from that channel. I don't know. I don't watch all of his content. I've only seen some of it, and what I have seen has repulsed me so much I don't want to watch any more of it. So there is an onus on parents to be informed, absolutely. There is an onus on parents to make sure they know what their kids are watching and are doing. Is it 100% possible all the time? No, it's not. It's not 100% possible for parents all the time to keep an eye on what their kids are watching. But the point that I have about the argument whereby people are saying, it's up to the parents and it's not Logan Paul's responsibility. I was like, at the end of the video, towards the end of the video, Logan Paul points out that there are children near the forest, the suicide forest in Japan. He makes a big deal about these children could see a dead body like he'd just seen, and wouldn't that be the worst thing in the world? He makes a big deal himself, showing supposed concern and, worry for the children in the immediate vicinity who are possibly at risk from seeing a dead body. And then he goes to proceeds and uploads it to his own YouTube channel, where the target demographic are 13 to 15-year-olds with people as young as 8. There's a hypocrisy in everything that has come through from him and his camp since uploading this. And I am not in any way doubting that this entire thing is for publicity, because the publicity that has come from him to him as a result of this is insane. He's in the news. He's in the everyday common folk news. He's basically inviting more YouTube clampdown, because now the general public are going to be in an outroar thinking that this is what people on YouTube do. Can you imagine? And it kind of basically has a backlash against everybody who vlogs, everybody who tries to do decent things, and people who do try and raise awareness about topics that matter to them on YouTube or other video sites. YouTube have also been interesting in this debacle. Not only did they fail to take the video down, which had anybody else put this up, if someone who didn't have millions of viewers, again, cash cow, had put this up, it would have been taken down immediately. It had Suicide Forest in the title, and it had a thumbnail with a dead body on it. There was no room for YouTube's algorithms, couldn't have found it. But they have said if someone is a big deal, they get special treatment, because that's how the world works, doesn't it, YouTube? Well done. I can have all my channel taken down because I have a spell oil on my YouTube. A oil with herbs in it is enough for my YouTube channel to get taken down. But Logan Paul can upload a dead body and nobody bats an eyelid at YouTube. grats YouTube. It gets worse with YouTube because they put it on trending. They handpick what goes on trending. What goes on trending is on their main page to promote to get more views. Now, people are saying because it's demonetized, he doesn't make money off it. That's bull. The pure amount of publicity this guy has got from this video is insane. He's in the regular news. He's on my MSN pop-up page. And I was just like, this beggars belief. This beggars belief that people can mock suicide victims and they're in the main news and everyone is going to know who they are and they're going to be infamous and their revenue is going to be through the roof now, even more. So I did want to talk about a few reactions I've seen to the suicide argument. So first of all, the thing that really ticked me off in the beginning is, like I said, is January is the month for suicide rates. It's like a documented thing that people know that January is the month where you're more statistically likely to kill yourself, commit suicide at any given point. And this nonsense comes out right on the 1st of January, when people are most at risk. That really bothered me. YouTube, Tracy says YouTube should have banned him and removed any content from him. See, the thing is, people are arguing for free speech. And if YouTube start being draconic against one, they're going to be draconic against everybody. Now, the thing is about this is YouTube has firm guidelines in place that should never have made the YouTube headline. It should never have been on trending, which they put there. And it shouldn't have been allowed by their own rules. So they're not implementing their own rules because it's one rule for everybody, the small content creators, etc., the people that they're basically driving out of business. And then the dude bros making all the money and all the views and selling some pretty heinous ideas. They don't care. They just don't care. So the first thing that bothered me, like I said, was January is statistically the worst month for suicide rates. And then there's people like Logan Paul putting out videos like, hey, look at this dead body. Look at my reaction to this dead body. Isn't this hilarious? Let's mock this dead person. Let's mock their pain. And people are saying, it's a dead body. What does he care? Well, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, people have friends and family. So even if you don't take issue with someone mocking somebody else's pain and death, there is family out there. There are friends out there. There are co-workers out there. And the thing about Japan is Japan's an honorific culture. They hold honor above all else. And suicide brings shame to people and shame to their families, rightly or wrongly. This happens worldwide. Suicide is also vastly underreported for a number of reasons, because one, if there is no suicide note, sometimes they don't get reported as suicide. Accidental overdose is quite frequently the death announcement of choice for people trying, especially people who have money and influence, to try and hide that one of their family members committed suicide. It's a known thing that happens to avoid the stigma of there was a suicide in the family. So if there are members of that individual in Japan's family, this could theoretically domino effect to more suicide, because having their entire family shamed is a huge deal in Japan, which is not something I've seen mentioned. Like the cultural significance of shame, rightly or wrongly, by promoting somebody's dead body all over YouTube, and it's now like in the mass media, is a huge thing in Japanese society. So that's another thing that I haven't seen really mentioned, that he went to a different culture and shat all over that culture, because of course he did, because he doesn't have respect for anything or anyone. And he purposefully went to a suicide forest to see what drama he could churn up to get the maximum amount of views and exposure. That's what he did. I don't believe anything otherwise. It's a choice. And then it's a choice to carry on recording it. It's a choice to mock it. It's a choice to make it into entertainment. So this is another thing I've seen people argue. Well, there are dead bodies on the news. How is it any different? Well, theoretically, and sadly not in actuality most of the time, particularly in America, although it happens here too, is that the news is supposed to be an independent body that reports factual information. That's not always what happens. The news is deeply flawed and corrupt, unfortunately, because again, billionaires behind the scenes. So the news is supposed to be an independent body informing the general populace. The general populace then are affecting the politics in their immediate vicinity, and that is supposed to have a domino effect and affect politics on a world scale. So when things are happening, such as wars across the ocean, people are seeing that people are suffering, it brings it home for them. People then feel incentivized because they know about it, they're informed to make an informed, we are talking broad strokes because there are a lot of problems with the news, informed decision to then go and try and affect the politics to try and get some kind of situation resolution. That is not always what happens, unfortunately, with the news, but that is the general idea behind the news. What is not the news is some dude bro uploading the suicide of an individual onto YouTube for entertainment purposes and putting it in the comedy category. It's not the same thing. And I've seen people kind of like latching political statements onto this about the news and this, and I'm like, I don't see that this is the place for blaming the left or the right and their effect and their influence on media. That's not really what we're talking about, but okay, sure, put your own agenda in, why not? So that's another thing that I want to talk about, that kind of like, it's not the same as the news. The YouTube is supposed to be independent creation content for people. Some people will argue content on YouTube is maybe even more truthful than the news these days, which says a sorry state for the news, but that is not why he uploaded that. This is not suicide awareness, this is not suicide prevention, and in fact, the way that he reported it is known to be a triggering mechanism for people who are already at risk of suicide. So I think Asbjørn mentioned this in his video, and I will give him props because he's in the other room and, you know, he'll come through and start shouting at me, otherwise not really. But there is a correlation between mental illness and suicide rates. There's a high correlation between mental illness and suicide rates. So there have been people who have been saying since, it's selfish, how dare people kill themselves, yada, 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 as their opinion following this debacle. Nobody's mentioning the fact that there is a strong correlation between different levels of mental illness and suicide. And when people who are mentally unstable, who are mentally unwell, who are already feeling like they might commit suicide, are then confronted with this sort of behavior from Logan Paul, who mocks people who have killed themselves, and then B, the entirety of backlash against people who have committed suicide, which is, when you think about it, crazy. There is somebody out there who's making fun of someone for whose pain was so great that he killed himself, and then there are people whose response to this is, let's have a go at people who commit suicide. There's a disconnect here somewhere. But then the people who are already mentally unstable, who are unwell, who are depressed, who go through all of this, and then maybe see either of these things or both of these things, it can be a trigger. It can, again, create more of a suicide culture because they feel like, I'm a bad person for even considering it. And when they're already in a place where they're feeling that they might want to harm themselves, guess what that does? It doesn't help. Kyle says it's disturbing, especially given that his majority was comprised of mostly of children and young teens. So I'm just going to repeat here for people who just came in that on the actual video himself, on his actual video, he claims that he's going around exclaiming that children could see the dead body. How could they allow children near this forest? And then he went and uploaded this to an audience of mainly children. Hypocrisy 101. So I've got a few stats in front of me from the official suicides in the UK, just to talk about this. The last time they took a poll is 2015, so there's a couple of years. But deaths in the UK rose from 6,122 in 2014 to 6,188 of the following year, increasing the rate from 10.8 to 10.9 deaths per 100,000 population. It's even great. There's a much greater rate in Japan, which again, there was no cultural sensitivity from anyone to do with that video. UK male suicide rates have actually decreased, while female suicide rates are increasing, although you're still more likely, 3 times more likely to kill yourself if you're male than if you're female. Yorkshire and the Humber in the UK had the highest rates of suicide. There were some stats that I really wanted to discuss here. The most common method of suicide among males and females in the UK in 2015. Okay, I'm gonna leave it for a minute, because if you were thinking what would be the most common form of suicide, I would have thought it would have been pills. It's not. It's hanging. So the most common method of suicide, regardless of gender, in the UK specifically, is hanging. What did Logan Paul show on his video? A male who had hung himself. So I'm wondering if they have anything here about the mental illness statistics. They do have here about the registration delays and the things like that. So there are resources online, such as You Can Cope, the National Suicide Hotline, and things like that, where you can go get help, which is another thing. That was attached to his video, which I guess at least it was attached to his video, I suppose. At least it was there. Okay, I was hoping they had the mental illness statistics. It doesn't look like it. I thought they did. Okay, noises outside, yay. So I can't find them, but I know there is a high correlation between mental illness and suicide rates. And because of that, people aren't necessarily in full control of their cognitive functions. Now, as somebody who suffers depression, and somebody who's grew up in an abusive background, and somebody who considered suicide at one point, and someone who had suicide in the family, my uncle committed suicide before I was born. And I could see the domino effect that had on his family for the rest of their lives. This is not something which I really feel that the argument that suicide is makes you a horrible human being, and I don't feel that that really helps the conversation whatsoever. Like, congratulations, you've passed a value judgment on something you may or may not have ever experienced. Most people who I see passing this judgment have never felt that way, so they have no empathy towards the other individual, because they've never felt that way, so they don't know what they're talking about, frankly. Unless you've been there, unless you've suffered with a mental illness, unless you've felt the call to not be here anymore. Yeah, and I will address that in a minute, Samantha. So I really don't feel that the people kind of like demonizing people who consider suicide or people who commit suicide is helpful at all. Maybe we should be looking at the roots of it. Maybe we should be looking at helping people. Maybe we should look at signs. Maybe we should be looking at easy, more accessible help. And maybe we should look at non-value judgment approaching to people who are in that situation, because maybe that would help before it got too late. Maybe. So Samantha, in the video on Facebook, which you won't be able to see on YouTube when I upload it, has said, again, not to make this about us, but I feel you on having a video demonetized because I mentioned a spirit guide, and I had my video demonetized. Have something like this trending is sad. We have much work to do as a community and as a human race. Yeah, I basically feel like the whole YouTube side of it is just money. If you're not pulling in enough money for them to consider you an asset, then they don't care, and you can go into the grand chasm of algorithm slapdown and silencing. But if you're earning enough, if you've got billions of followers, how has this individual got billions of followers? Is it just literally they've got billionaires backing them up and that has got them to this point? I don't know. So I wanted to talk about the fact that he mentioned kids himself, and then people are saying it's not his responsibility if he has kids watching him. Well, like I said, there is onus on the parents to keep an eye on what your kids are watching. Is it always possible? I don't think it always is, especially when they reach the 13 to 15 mark. That's a little bit more complicated, especially in this day and age with free technological information everywhere. It was difficult when I was at school. And that's when mobile phones were a new thing. And like, can you imagine how many 15-year-olds now have access to like an iPhone with instant internet easily? And how many parents wouldn't think to straight away to, they'd be like, as a parent, you'd think to straight away be blocking like the dodgier sites in your mind, like stuff that promotes hatred, stuff that's hardcore pornography, stuff that's like promoting anorexia and bulimia and like, and even suicide. You'd probably think of those things. Would have YouTube initially be on the top of your list to think to maybe try and like veer your kids off? I don't know. I think it's a good idea to keep an eye on what they're watching. Sure. I'm not sure that YouTube is immediately on the top of the danger list as a thought process as an adult. Yeah, Tracy says, I'm a parent and it's all but impossible to know everything your kid sees. So then there are people saying they saw weird stuff on the internet growing up and it didn't affect them. I think we're not really talking about the people who these things don't affect. We're talking about the people who it does, because there's always people who are in that very vulnerable state already, and they're already very vulnerable, and then maybe they felt some kind of connection to these younger YouTubers. He's not that young though. He's 22, 23, so he's not that young. People are like, he's young, like he doesn't have a cognitive function, like he doesn't have an empathy filter yet because he's only 22, 23. And I'm like, most 22, 23-year-olds are at university or in work. They're already fucking responsible for their own like state for the most part. Like, how is he different because he's rich and on YouTube? Sure, whatever. I know that I had a much grander ethical and moral sense of obligation by that age, so sure, but all right, whatever. If it feels you feel better excusing it because of age, doesn't make a slight bit of difference. Yeah, I think the best. So Samantha says she has a 13 and a 15-year-old, and it's difficult to block everything, and to know it's best way to let them use their judgment as young adults. Yeah, and he's old enough to serve his country. Yeah, exactly. That's more of an American thing, so it's not something I ever think of. It does happen here too, of course. Young men do go off and serve their country. Yeah, he can fight in the war on defense of his country, but he can't consider who he's uploading his videos to. Sure. There is this interesting dynamic of how much is a content creator responsible for their content and who imbibes their content and who is, aware of their content, especially when they have 50 million viewers, etc. And I believe in free speech because I think the problem is this: when we start censoring, then we start censoring everybody, and it becomes a form of control, and that's already happening. I think that's a lot of people's problems, is that the censorship and the control is already happening if you're not rich enough to buy off YouTube or whomever. That's already happening to people who are putting out messages, and sadly they're putting out messages of a spiritual nature who just want to help people. If I bet you anything, if I entitled this video "Suicide" at any given point, it would be demonetized and even maybe taken down. I've even not called it that on purpose because I know it will be taken down. They take down a lot. They like demonetize most of my videos within 5 minutes now, and I sit and wait for it to happen so I can then click appeal straight away. And then they every single time it's been appealed, they've left it and given me my monetization back, if I've noticed. And I'm a small channel, so I get censored. People like Logan Paul mocking dead bodies do not. So then there is that attitude. There is the attitude where he made jokes and is mocking the dead body and zooming in on his hands and making it all about him. This is something we've experienced now. Dude. I don't like the guy. I'm biased against the guy. I'll fully admit it. I've seen some of his content. I've seen his content against women. I've seen his content like constant, like tube down the throat, vomit-inducing, merchandise-selling content. I don't like it. I'm biased against him. I completely admit it. And so I wasn't even slightly surprised that it was him being insensitive like this. So I do have that bias, and I'll completely own to that. But the way he was mocking the suffering, the end result, the suffering of somebody, it's not raising awareness. And in fact, what has actually happened as a result is kind of like anti-awareness. It's kind of allowed all the people who come forward and present a victim-blaming mentality of suicide to come to the fore. And it's really troubling in my mind, because I feel like the upsurge of backlash against people who commit suicide is only going to make matters worse. The only video that I have watched, and I watched it with Darren, and Darren's already said this, that I felt like completely was empathetic and helpful, was the Boogies video. He's a gaming YouTube channel. And he kind of was like trying to offer an empathetic approach, trying to discuss this with this guy, trying to reach out and be like, dude, it's not okay. And I just don't think that it's going to get through to these people, because basically these people are bullies. And I've seen a lot of their videos, and I don't think, unless serious action is taken against them, unless it hits them where it matters, their wallet, I don't think it's going to. And it's not going to hit them in their wallet, because the pure amount of advertisement that he's had, free advertisement from this one thing, is insane, which is why initially I considered not doing this video. So, to the people out there, and this is how we will finish it, the young people, first and foremost, who are watching, if any of them come across this, which I kind of doubt, but if they come across this, firstly, you are worth more than the merchandise that you buy. You are worth more than being told you're a bicycle to be ridden by men. You are a human being. Your thoughts, feelings, and opinions are valid. That being said, they're not more valid than anybody else's, so make informed decisions. If you're a person who watches this, Logan Paul, and supports this, I ask you to think about the repercussions of the culture that this individual is promoting. If you are someone who's going on about people who are committing suicide, I ask that you look at statistics, first and foremost. Try and make yourself as informed as possible. And then remember that statistics are flawed, because the amount of suicides that go unreported, the things that they get changed to, there's a vast amount of shame with families, and they try and hide suicide rates. So suicide is probably a much worse problem than statistics report. It's probably a lot bigger than statistics report, because there is an iceberg effect, meaning that the little bit on top that we know about is nothing compared to the stuff underneath the water that we don't know about, because of the underreporting, because of the shame element. They have tick boxes to whether or not something should be considered suicide, and sometimes if there's not a note of any form, they will write it off and not call it suicide just because they can't find the note. And families have been known to destroy the notes and things knowing that, before the body is officially claimed, if you like. So artificial and accidental death is ruled instead of suicide in a lot of cases. So there is a underreporting thing that goes on. So we don't know the overall trends, patterns, truths of suicide because the information is just not fully there in a lot of cases. Then there's to those who are going out there blaming people who commit suicide. Please stop. Yes, you have your opinion. Congratulations. We all have our opinion. Is it helpful? Is it kind? Do you think you make the families feel better for people who've lost someone by saying that the person who killed themselves was a terrible human being? Does that make them feel better? No. Does it take back the act of suicide? No. Does it stop people in the future committing suicide? No. It just makes things worse. So how is that helpful for anything? To pass a value judgment? It's not. It's not helpful. It's not part of the discussion which makes a better tomorrow. It's just not. So to any individuals out there, finally, who are feeling that they may or feel suicidal, try and remember that life changes. There are methods out there to get help, whether it be to do with mental health help, every kind of help. You can get help. There is help available for you. There are people who will listen. There are suicide hotlines. Your voice matters. And your life matters. Because to change this world, we need individuals to talk about their pain, their suffering, what drove them to that point, and how to come back. And then when we can talk about coming back, when we can talk about the reasons we didn't, then we can help other people and we can stop the stigma attached to these things. We can stop the mockery of people in pain, at least a little. There will always be horrible, callous individuals who make fun of other people's pain because they've got nothing better to do, or because they haven't grown up, or because there's just something deeply wrong with their sense of empathy for other individuals. Who knows? But if you can, hold on, talk to someone, and come back. Because who knows what you could do the rest of your life. You can follow your dreams. You can change the world. If you can just hold on. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to send you all my love, people. Thank you for listening. Many blessings.